So, welcome for another episode of Reflections with the ACIM-Reflections. I'm glad to see you in my mind, see you in that activity of extending the light, of giving that you know as true and as real in you to all of yourself. And it is really a light extension, a thought, an extension of the thought of God. And that realization within the soul itself, within the heart of hearts, within the mind that thinks with God, within Christ mind, of knowing myself, knowing thyself. And all gratitude, of course, for all the help that is given us by that inner voice, that voice that speaks for God, that voice that has become really our guide and um, yeah, and becoming certain that teaching and learning is an ongoing experience in the awakened mind, and I can only teach, you can only teach what we know as true. And what is true hasn't really anything to do what we see with our eyes, what we hear with our ears. What is true is only true in the mind itself, in the frequency of the light thought of God itself. So thank you for that. Thank you. And of course, we are in a part of sharing the original version of the textbook of A Course in Miracles and the lessons of the workbook of A Course in Miracles, where he makes also this emphasis of teaching with him, teaching with that higher mind, teaching with that certainty what truly extends and teaches, and has nothing to do with appearances, has nothing to do with how things look like or how they are perceived. Because what I perceive with my eyes is just the um, utmost form of self-deception, I would say. And that's what it is called then, from beginning to the end in A Course in Miracles. And the wrong-mindedness of ego mind, right? And of course, our full endeavor is to align our mind to right-mindedness, to think along the miracle mindedness, and that thinking along with his thoughts is of course also reflected in a certainty in the mind that none of this that is seen, heard, felt is ultimately true. We do go along with our intuitions and with our inner feelings, but they come and go. They have grades, they vary. So that means also they do not represent the ultimate truth of who you are, who I am. And in the original text, where we are at the beginning of chapter 4, in the edited version, we might now again read, after having done the introduction of chapter 4, the illusion of the ego, starts with section 1, right teaching and right learning. It is called, and in the Complete and Annotated Edition, it's called the devoted teacher. And so we will read probably some, I didn't really look it up, where it comes then again into alignment that it is in both editions. But there are certain parts again which are not in the edited version. So if you want to look it up and have just the edited version, you are invited to just listen and just relax into it. But how to start out with what we are at by in the activity, by doing the lesson of the day, by utilizing the daily lesson in how we go along with our experience. And we find ourselves in the 6th review, and we are reviewing those last lessons, this last section 181 to 200. And so the lessons, every day one lesson from 201 to 220 will then conclude the first part, which is the undoing part. And from there on, it will strengthen and will profoundly, from in the second part, show us how that light frequency really becomes the complete basis and recognition of self. And so, in this transition of the undoing lessons, those first 200 lessons, and now before 221, the second part starts, these 20 lessons transitionally seen. We are every day in every situation remembering what we are not in order to recognize what we are. So I'm not a body, is the mind is directed towards acknowledgement of, okay, here is something that feels very real, here's something, an idea that has been believed to be existent throughout all time, but now I know it with certainty from that frequency of light, from that experience with God, that it is not true. And that means that I'm coming from a different level where I cannot even speak of how that level of true recognition falls in place in the mind. I can only say it is natural, because that is how mind thinks. Mind thinks along the truth and not along illusions. So whenever there are coming illusions up and differences are seen, or whatever images become important, just remember your goal, or you're going along, is towards the complete truth, in which no images, perceptual images, are seen at all. There's only light to be seen, God to be experienced. And so in that 6th review, in the introduction to these lessons, as I already mentioned, the sentence that we are using throughout the days, I'm not a body, then what am I? And it's not another body, it's not another form, it's not another etheric or astral body. I'm free, it's freedom, because freedom is in the mind. And the acknowledgement then, which comes from that experience, direct singular experience, for I'm still as God created me. And whenever anything comes up in the mind, which is, of course, as long as we walk this earth and use perception in order to go along and, let's say, and learn and be active in these learning and teaching situations, we are also given a sentence which we can apply immediately, no matter what type of illusionary thought form comes up in the mind. And he expresses it in the way, this thought I do not want. So we demonstrate that decision, we demonstrate a new choice. This thought I do not want, I choose instead. And then I can fill in whatever comes in my mind. If it is the lesson of the day, then I will fill in that my name, I call upon God's name and on my own, and the name of God is my inheritance, just to mention these lessons where I find myself today and tomorrow, or we were just reviewing in the last 2 days, I trust my brothers who are one with me, which is really an acknowledgement that there is only brothers in the mind. So that is the reflection of the one true self. And as you might see and tell, you can tell there are not different names given. There are not connections to nationalities given, to races given, to subcultures given. It's called brothers. No one but is my brother, he says. Everyone is my brother. Every being is my brother. And I will be still an instant and go home was what we always like to remember and practiced yesterday. But of course, we take these ideas with us. And so if they come in your mind, in order to replace a thought that you don't want, any illusionary thought, then feel free to use any of these lessons. Nothing I see means anything. Lesson one, any lesson will definitely help, because it is a choice to align the mind, thinking along with the Holy Spirit Himself. And what we try is we will attempt to get beyond all words and special forms of practicing for this review, he says in this fourth paragraph. For we attempt this time to reach, and here is really why I wanted to share it with you, to reach a quickened pace along a shorter path to the serenity and peace of God. So we are doing that, we are active with it. We want that above all else, because we are looking to accelerate our mind, our thinking so fast that we can literally leave instantaneously any reflection of grievance, any reflection of the ego. We're looking for this quickened pace along a shorter path. And a shortening of time is really what the miracle is by definition. To where to? To the serenity and peace of God. This is our goal. And he gives the simplest instruction that anybody could ever practice or go along with. We merely close our eyes and then forget all that we thought we knew and understood. It is that decision to forget the past, to forget the word, even to forget this course, he says, and come with holy empty hands to our Creator. So forgetting is the action of forgiveness. Forgetting and forgiving is the same. And thus is freedom given us from all we didn't know and failed to understand. Freedom, we don't need to analyze anything. We don't need to understand how it is really, from where it is coming from, when, which lifetime, in which connection, all these karma teachings. It's we don't need to understand how it really came about. We only need to acknowledge that till that choice and that action of mind of replacing a limited thought form with thoughts that are aligned with his mind, uh, which represented the failure of understanding, we haven't arrived anywhere. The moment we start with this decision, we start with this new practicing, this thought I do not want, I choose instead. I choose instead. You could just say the peace of God. And then just close your eyes, forget all the past, forget everything that you taught yourself till now, and enter into this new learning where you are automatically also teaching, because that is what it ultimately is. Every moment is a perfect situation for myself, for yourself, to learn and to teach, because learning is teaching. So we left it the last time finishing up in that original version, the first section of chapter 4, and we continue what is in the complete and annotated version the second sequence. We have spoken of many different human symptoms, and at this level, there's almost endless variation, but there's only one cause for all of them. Now we might just stop here a moment and think what he's talking about and what he means, and might even inquire. And the answer is quite extraordinary, that you already have heard before, but you might not guess that he's now pinpointing to the authority problem itself. So there's only one cause for all the different human symptoms on all levels, like if it is a mental issue where the separation is helped through, if it is an emotion which goes into fear, or if it already is lived out on physical symptoms, in order to have that as a teaching situation in order to learn. There are endless variations, but there's only one cause for all these symptoms. The authority problem is, and he put it under quotes, the root of all evil. Now, we have heard that because it is a Bible expression, right? And the root of all evil, and that is then used also in political terms as those are the ones who are the terrorists, or the ones who are attacking you or trying to attack you, or being whatever. It's the root of all evil is considered in the ego mind as something out there, something outside oneself. But the truth is, it's not outside myself. If there is a root of all evil, and he pinpoints it, he defines it as the authority problem, then finger on the nose, and we make an investigation, an inquiry into our own mind. And that is really what the invitation is. Money is but one of its many reflections, and is a reasonable representative example of the kind of thinking which stem from it. But as you hear it, it's just one of its many reflections. The idea of buying and selling implies precisely the kind of exchange that the souls cannot understand at all. Here he still put it in plural, souls, but it is all capitalized. But of course, we do understand soul as a singular, a completely singular idea, because while that maybe when it was put like this, then in the CAE, in the complete annotated version, it was then also used the edited word of spirit, that the spirit cannot understand at all, because their own supply is always abundant and all their demands are fully met. I just wanted to say again, because it will come up again for sure, that soul, as we can also then find it in the clarification of terms, it is also mentioned, and it is expressed there also because of the controversial nature of meanings. It has been left out or edited into spirit or into Holy Spirit or other words and expressions. But if we understand the soul really as the heart of hearts, that's where the experience in the mind of the light and love and joy is. Then that soul capitalized is, of course, absolutely an appropriate term to use, because we do join and we do experience soul, but I wouldn't use it in plural form as in an indication that there would be individuality or personality involved. That was the misunderstanding, and that was also the reason why it was then edited out of how Jesus was mentioning it in the original form. Every symptom, going back to those many different human symptoms, every symptom which the ego has made involves a contradiction in terms. This is because the mind is split between the ego, and now it is in singular, and the soul. The mind is split then between the ego and the soul. So that whatever the ego makes is incomplete and contradictory. So here we can see that he's definitely going into recognition of the connection of the human symptoms and its undoing and bringing it to the clarity of, okay, this thought I do not want, I choose instead, and opening it completely to an alternative thought form, alternative way of thinking. So whatever the ego makes is complete and is incomplete and contradictory. Consider what, and he calls it here, speechless professor means as a concept. A professor that doesn't use speech. It literally means a non-professing professor or a non-speaking speaker. and an ignorant knower, you could add on, and so on. Untenable positions such as this are the result of the authority problem, which, because it accepts the one inconceivable thought as its premise, can only produce ideas which are inconceivable. And yet, if we really inquire that into the experience itself, then we might say, okay, here I find myself speaking, so I could identify with the speaker, but I don't need to. If I'm really inquiring into the nature, into the origin of the one who speaks, I actually come to the non-speaking speaker, because the speaker itself is really getting lost in that inquiry, in that experience. And when an identity gets lost, it always opens up to the true source, which I could then call Holy Spirit, right? So where have we left it? Oh, here, inconceivable. You may claim, and he talked this to Bill, and Bill has certainly done so in the past, that the professorship was thrust upon him. So that is what, that was his claim, right? That it had nothing to do with him, it was thrust upon him. Jesus says this is not true. He wanted it very much. Or you can say, whatever where you find yourself in your extension, in your teaching expression, is exactly that you wanted it. He wanted it very much and also worked hard to get it. I will never forget those decisions when they came in my mind within my awakening experience, where I asked for to be shown, to be guided, to be given even all the means of expression, of communication, in order to bring about this message so that it can be unmistakenly understood by entering the experience itself. So it's never something that is thrust upon us. He would not have had to work so hard either if he had not misunderstood it. The term profess is used quite frequently in the Bible. Of course, we know, when those who know the Bible well, that it was used in a different context, in a different understanding. But here it says it anyway, but in a somewhat different context. To profess is to identify with an idea and offer the idea to others to be their own. To profess is to identify with an idea and offer the idea to others to be their own. The idea does not lessen, it becomes stronger. And every idea becomes strengthened and becomes stronger in the moment we are sharing them, the moment we give them away. All ideas given away strengthen its content. And that's on all levels. That's also on the ego level, of course. The teacher clarifies his own ideas and strengthens them by teaching them. Here is that action of sharing, of giving it away. It is clarified for oneself and strengthened by teaching them. Teacher and pupil, therapist and patient are all alike in the learning process. They are in the same order of learning, and unless they share their lessons, they will lack conviction. And we're hearing that over and over and over again from the beginning of the course, especially these first chapters. Jesus makes a clear emphasis in this Course in Miracles that learning and teaching are the same. And so the ones who come as the learner and find the teacher and the teacher are absolutely in the same action of awakening, in the same remembrance, in the same order of learning, he calls it. And unless they share their lessons, they will lack conviction. What does it mean in another word of lacking conviction? It means doubt creeps in. Doubt is what is believed to be oneself, and doubt is shared, and comparison, judgment, categorization, all this comes from doubt. And of course, at the end, the personal experience is to be not happy, to feel not free. And here gives the example with the salesman. If a salesman must believe in the product he sells, how much more must a teacher believe in the ideas which he professes? But he needs another condition. He must also believe in the students to whom he offers his ideas. That belief, of course, is to bring that relationship of the teacher with the student from the teacher's perspective into the certainty and the truth that the student, so to speak, the learner, doesn't know less than he himself. That is something that everyone here, me included, has to remember. There is nobody out there who wouldn't know that, what I'm teaching right now to myself. The ones who come to find me already know it also. So what are we doing here? We are learning by remembering. We are literally, as we just had it with the lessons of the day, a review. We are reviewing what we are not in order to strengthen what we are by making another choice. You could not be afraid. Again, he was originally talking to Bill. You could not be afraid to teach unless you still believe that interaction means loss and that learning means separation. So he brings here in the fear of teaching. To be afraid to teach unless you still believe that interaction means loss, that something would be taken away from you by you interacting with your, so to speak, learners, students, pupils, patients, however you want to describe wherever you, on which level you work. Learning means separation. That's the concept beyond that needs to be completely undone. Learning is, in that sense, aligned with pure remembering. He stands guard over his own ideas because he wants to protect the thought system as it is, But learning means change. Learning means change. So now he shows us, as we were using the lesson, because every decision is a decision for change. Change is always fearful to the separated, because they cannot conceive of it as a change toward healing the separation. They always perceive it as a change for further separation, because separation was their first experience of change. Right? And coming to this earth level as a body experience, and that change of coming into this level is immediately experienced as being separate from the source. Your whole fear of teaching, now he brings it very nicely. Okay, they always perceive it as a change for further separation, because separation was their first experience of change. Your whole fear of teaching is nothing but an example of your own intense separation anxiety. Separation anxiety, he calls it, which you have handled with the usual series of mixed defenses in the combined pattern of attack on truth and defense of error, which characterizes all ego thinking. What an expression, isn't it? So a mixed defenses in the combination with attack on truth and defense of error characterizes all ego thinking. You insist that if you allow no change to enter into your ego, now let's listen very carefully, because here comes where he's again talking about soul in the true meaning as that singular core of our being, and brings it in context that there's really no communication going on between soul and the ego. I used this as the title of today's class, but he brings it really from all perspectives, that there is really nothing that comes from the soul and arrives or can be seen or is recognized by the ego, and vice versa. Anything that comes from the ego is really nothing in the soul. So he puts it very nicely here. So first he says, you insist that if you allow no change to enter into your ego, your soul will find peace. So that is the deception, Like if I don't allow, I'm not going to look at the news anymore and don't listen to anybody who talks about the climate change and so on. I'm completely excluding it from my awareness. So to not allow change to enter into your ego, then the deceiving belief system would be that the soul could find peace. He points it out very clearly as a profound confusion. This profound confusion is possible only if one maintains that the same thought system can stand in two foundations. Then it's still, okay, there's a reality that comes from the Holy Spirit, and then the reality that comes from the ego is the same real. That's what the mind training is really doing beyond words, that it clarifies that what comes from the ego isn't even there. It cannot even be seen. Therefore, it cannot be thought or felt either. Nothing can reach the soul from the ego. Here we have it. And nothing from the soul can strengthen the ego or reduce the conflict within it. The ego is a contradiction. Man's self and God's self are in opposition. They are opposed in creation, in will and in outcome. And that opposition, of course, is not a real opposition. It's just an opposition on the level of the thinking, of thought level, as long as you're thinking about it. Because in truth, it is what I just said before. Truth is true and nothing else is true. There's nothing there besides truth. That's the truth. So as long as it is seen and perceived and seen its evidence, you first we start by acknowledging, okay, those are opposing thought systems, and they are opposed in creation, in will, and in outcome. They are fundamentally irreconcilable because the soul cannot perceive. The soul, capitalized, right, cannot perceive, and the ego cannot know. They are therefore not in communication and can never be in communication. That was my title, never in communication. We're reflecting on soul and the ego, never in communication. Soul is never in communication with the ego, and vice versa. Nevertheless, the ego can learn because its maker can be misguided, but cannot make the totally lifeless out of the life given. The soul need not be taught, but the ego must be taught. The ultimate reason why learning or teaching is perceived as frightening is because true learning does lead to the relinquishment, not destruction, relinquishment of the ego to the light of the soul. I read it again. The ego can learn because its maker can be misguided, but cannot make the totally lifeless out of the life given. All that illusionary thought forms. What is lifeless? What is literally nothing? It cannot make nothing, you could say, out of what is full of life. What is life? What is of God? The soul need not be taught, but the ego must. The ultimate reason why learning or teaching is perceived as frightening is because true learning does lead to the relinquishment, not destruction, of the ego to the light of the soul. This is the change the ego must fear because it doesn't share my charity. It doesn't share my charity, Jesus says. This is really the remembrance that only love is, and everything is lovable, and everything is worthy to be loved. My lesson, Jesus says, was like yours, and because I learned it, I can teach it. And so how about you? You are learning it, so you can teach it. Teaching is demonstrating the truth of yourself, what you know as true, as that one self, the light of the soul. I never attack your egos, in spite of, that is in quotes, in parentheses, in spite of Helen's strange belief to the contrary. But I do try to teach them how their thought systems have arisen. Very nice expression. That is really my guiding basis of teaching myself, to remember not to attack the ego, but to try to teach all ego reflection, because it is a reflection of myself, how their thought systems have arisen, how it came about, that it became so misunderstood, so misinterpreted, so misguiding. When I remind you of your true creation, your egos cannot but respond with fear. And of course, then withdraw, because where there's fear, there's the attempt to withdraw from that light. Teaching and learning are your greatest strengths now, because you must change your mind and help others change theirs. This was initially given and directed in that on that level to Bill himself. But of course, this is Jesus talking to me. This is Jesus talking to you. Teaching and learning are our greatest strengths now, because we must change our mind and help others change theirs. It is pointless to refuse to tolerate change or changing, to refuse change or changing, because you believe that you can demonstrate by doing so that the separation never occurred. It is pointless, he says. Did you hear? The dreamer who doubts the reality of his dream while he's still dreaming it is not really healing the level split. So the dreamer who doubts the reality of his dream while he's still dreaming it is not really healing the level split. That's important, like we address literally on that level where the misunderstanding or the misinterpretation has happened. We're not going to overlook it or override it immediately. Well, that's not true, or well, that's not real. No, we have to look first at it, and we have to acknowledge it. Okay, what does that have to do with me? These are my thoughts, maybe of the past, because I already have learned and know what the truth now is, know myself. But it still needs, and it's an invitation of that conversion of mind. Here's the practice right there. This thought I do not want. I choose instead the peace of God. You have dreamed of a separated ego, and you have believed in a world which rested upon it. This is very real to you. You cannot undo this by doing nothing and not changing. So, in that sense, that of course, if I'm looking here into certain non-duality teachings, where that change, that conversion of thought is not thought, is not wanted, is not followed, but it is basically just going straight to the recognition of its nothingness, of its unreality. So here Jesus gives a clear indication that the undoing only happens by being active with that and not by doing nothing and not changing. If you're willing to renounce the role of guardians of your thought systems and open them to me, to Christ, right? I will correct them very gently and lead you home. Every good teacher hopes to give his students so much of his own thinking that they will one day no longer need him. And of course, we do repeat that over and over again in all our coming together and relationships, that this is just temporary and it just serves the purpose until there is the complete certainty in the mind of the one who came as the learner. And that means he doesn't need the teacher anymore. And then the teacher can just go home, just disappear in its form presentation and be present as light itself. It doesn't need a form expression anymore, though the form expression will always be available as long as there is a request for learning and for that teaching, for that demonstration. This is the one real goal of the parent, teacher, and therapist. This goal will not be achieved by those who believe that they will lose their child or pupil or patient if they succeed. So those who cling on it, those who don't want to let go, those who maintain and continue that relationship in, let's say, whatever group forums, ashrams, monasteries, churches, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Now, this is a teaching. We are talking here about Jesus Christ, Jesus resurrected teaching for yourself, for myself. And you are here and came to me exactly today in order to hear that. And that hearing it is also your willingness to go along with that teaching, to accept that, and to accept exactly how he expresses it here, that you will no longer be afraid of losing where your object of relationship is, because of course it's a relationship. Everything is a relationship. I have a relationship with everyone and every being, but I'm free, or I'm, there might, even if there comes up once in a while an idea of fear, but I am free. I'm not a body, I'm free. And that freedom is also in the mind aware of the impossibility to lose what is a reflection of myself, because I cannot lose what I see, what stands behind that reflection, which is pure Christ light, being as God created his one Son. And that is what you are. That is what I am. Thank you. Thank you. So I will just leave it with that here on this. It's a little bit a longer part, and we will continue if we are coming together one again, which is also open, of course, because in that sense we cannot control anything, how that plan for teaching and learning is given, because the undoing is always complete in the moment itself. But here I am, here you are, and there's gratitude in the heart, in the soul. We are joined in the one soul, and in the expression of gratitude we know ourselves as one, and as love, as the beloved creation of God himself. Thank you. Thank you. You have a most wonderful day. We meet in that light always, and there's never any moment where we are or could possibly be separate. So let's just listen to a few moments to I will be still in an instant and go home with Doug, brother Doug. What a wonderful remembrance of the content of lesson 182. I love you, brother. Thank you.
I will be still an instant and go home. I will be still an instant and go home. My kingdom is not of this world. This is not where I belong. I will be still an instant and go home. I will be still an instant and go home. this world. This is not where I belong. I will be still an instant. I will be still an instant. I will be still an instant and go.